I want to welcome you to the very first in our presidential research series. Thank you so much for coming. As you can see, we tried to make things look a little different here because we are very pleased to have a video crew from Norman here recording. And what we're hoping to do with this presidential research series a couple of times a semester is a couple of things. One is we want to elevate the importance of research in our community. It is something that's fundamental to what we do as a university and as educators. And so we want to elevate the conversation, but what's great about Tulsa is we can do it in this way that we include people from across all of the departments on campus, and I see so many people here from literally every corner of our campus. And that's really what we're trying to do, is achieve conversation and community and cross disciplines. So I'm delighted to have you here. So the other reason for the video crew and some of the draping is just so that when we have the normal wood paneling back there, it doesn't always come across in video really well. And we're going to use these for external audiences because we have guests that attend and external stakeholders that hear about these research talks. And so we want to be able to kind of promote our research and promote the work that you all are doing to take it wide. So today is our very first. I want to just give you a teaser. We have in the back of the front row over there, Dr. Hazem Rafai and Dr. Thorder Runnelson, who will speak in November. I think it's November 5th. They're going to be doing number 2 in our presidential research series. And the kicker is, if you attend 3 out of 4, we'll have 4 this year, so that's November 5th is the second one this semester, there will be 2 next semester, you will be eligible to get some swag. I don't have a demo to show you, but a presidential research series coffee mug, which you will definitely want. So that is to encourage your continued participation. So when we decided to kick this off, there really was very little question as to who we should invite, but the leadership of the Early Childhood Education Institute, Drs. Diane Horm and Sherry Castle, they are leading researchers on early childhood education, and in terms of, they do applied research examining children's experiences and development in early care and education settings. They have a multitude of partnerships, and their work is known certainly locally with local partners, but regionally, nationally, and even internationally. And so it is now my great pleasure to turn things over to Drs. Horm and Castle.
Thank you, John, for the generous introduction, and we're very pleased to be the kickoff speakers in this new research series here at OU Tulsa. And thank you, audience, for coming out today. It's really nice to see this auditorium almost full, at least on the bottom half, so thank you for your attendance. So we're going to talk about the Early Childhood Education Institute, but first we're going to introduce ourselves. So I'm Diane Horm, and as John said, I'm the director of the Early Childhood Education Institute, but I also wear the hat as a faculty member in the College of Education here at OU Tulsa. I am a faculty member in early childhood and teach undergraduate early childhood courses as well as doctoral courses. So just a quick minute to tell you about our academic programs. We have a bachelor's completion program in early childhood education that we run in conjunction with Tulsa Community College. So the students start there for their first 2 years and transfer to us for the second 2 years. We also started a doctoral program in 2011. When we were out recruiting for the undergraduate program, people asked us when we would start the doctoral program. And although that was not on our radar screen at the time, there was community demand. So we started that in 2011. So we have graduated about 12 doctoral students, and most of them are scattered around Oklahoma, working in colleges, training the next generation of early childhood educators. And one of our graduates is Sherry Castle, who is pursuing a bit different of a career, and that's a research career. So Sherry, talk about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sherry Castle, and I have been here at OU Tulsa for 7 years now. I'm born and raised here in Oklahoma, lived the vast majority of my life here, and I'm so excited to be able to contribute to the work that we're doing here at OU Tulsa that contributes to our community, to the well-being of children all around us, and to the national field. So recently, I've accepted the position as Assistant Director for Research for the Early Childhood Education Institute, and that means that I am the point person kind of overseeing all of our research work, including our applied research partnerships evaluation that we do out in the community, as well as more independent kind of investigator-directed research that we're developing.
So we'll start today by just talking about who we are as a research group. So as John mentioned, we do applied research, so we're an applied research group, and we do have those partnerships out in the community, so we're very much enacting the goal of OU Tulsa to be community relevant and community connected. We started in 2006. I had the opportunity to move here from Rhode Island in 2006, and that's when we started our academic programs as well as our research program. As you can see, since 2006, we've grown. This is our current photograph, and we are 47 strong. So let me give a shout out to my colleagues. If you're a member of our group, please put your hand up. You can see we stacked or padded the audience a little bit. So we're 47 strong, and we do a range of research projects in collaboration with community partners and with other researchers from across the country. Let's see, we occupy 3 different buildings and 4 different spaces within those buildings. So this is a pop quiz. How many of you know where Building 12 is located? Okay, a few winners in the audience. So yes, we're in Building 4, 4 West, and 12, and we have offices and laboratory space across all those spaces. So that's who we are as a group, and Sherry will talk to you a little bit more about what else we're going to talk about today.
So today in our time together, we're looking forward to sharing with you about our work at the Early Childhood Education Institute. We're going to start off by giving you kind of Child Development 101, why we care about early childhood and why we think you should too, and hope that by the end of the day that you're convinced that you should care too. And then we'll be talking a little bit about our current research, outlining some of our studies that we have ongoing, as well as some little snippets of findings from our work. And then we'll wrap things up by talking about how you can join us, how you can come alongside us and contribute to children's healthy and optimal well-being and development, and wrap it up with a time for question and answers. And we might even, if you have more of this is more of a comment than a question, we might even take those too. So we're looking forward to it. Feel free to get more food if you need to or whatever, and we'll be on our way.
So the Early Childhood Education Institute is currently launching our 3rd strategic plan. So we've been around for 13 years, and we're now starting our 3rd strategic plan. And on the slide, you'll see our vision and mission. And this really grew out of our work from the first 12 years of our existence, and also from the urging and motivation provided by our external advisory board. We have an external advisory board that's made up of local and state leaders who run agencies dedicated to young children and their families. And we also have national level researchers who are our colleagues on our advisory board. And they come once a year, and we roll out all of our work to them and get their opinion and advice on what we should be doing. And what they noted is our 2nd strategic plan was a 10-year plan, but we had accomplished most of our goals in the first 2 to 3 to 4 years. And they said, you guys need to be more ambitious. Set your sights higher. Strive for more. So we took up that challenge, and we changed up our vision and mission. So our vision, as you see it there on the slide, is to understand and advance equity in early childhood. And we define equity as each child has the opportunity to maximize their developmental potential. Now, that vision statement is different from our previous one by only one word. Our previous vision statement was to understand and advance quality. We know that quality early childhood settings have a major impact on young children in terms of fostering their development. And for the first 12 years, we spent a lot of time with our community partners looking at their classroom quality, looking at the qualifications of their teachers, looking at the experiences young children had, to really foster qualities because we know that produces good outcomes in young children. Okay, so that was a great mission, and we certainly prospered for those 12 years. But we know there's a lot of inequities, and those inequities have serious lifetime consequences. There's inequities in children's access to high-quality early childhood education. There is inequity in access to health care. Some of you in the audience really care about that. So we're broadening our mission and vision to really look at equity. And so that will allow us to partner with more people, to really focus on other issues that build on but extend our current focus. Now, in our striving to understand and advance equity in early childhood, we're an applied research group. So our role in that is by conducting high-quality, meaningful research and disseminating that to the audiences that it will make a difference with. So we certainly publish in research journals and talk to our research colleagues that way, but we also strive to do policy briefs and practice briefs and other forms of communication that reach multiple audiences. And we're going to try to really double down on that kind of as we enact this third strategic plan over the next 5 years. So why are we successful in Tulsa? So one reason, partly underlying our success as a research group, is that Tulsa is home to nationally known and famous early childhood programs. This is kind of like the la-la land of early childhood here in Tulsa. Whoops, I got ahead of myself. So this slide shows some of our community partners who support our work or who we currently collaborate with. So you'll see George Kaiser Family Foundation. They are one of our funders. They were very instrumental in the start of our academic program, and they provide financial support to our research group each year. Now, that financial support really helps us reach out and work with CAP Tulsa and Tulsa Educare. The George Kaiser Family Foundation also provides support to those agencies. CAP Tulsa and Tulsa Educare are direct service agencies who deliver services to young children and their families. And both of them receive Head Start funding. And Head Start is a program that many of you may have heard about because it's our federal government's national early childhood program. It's a comprehensive family and child development program, which means it focuses on children's education, but also on their health, nutrition, parent support, family support, mental health services. So it really looks at the whole child and the whole family and strives to support those children who are growing up in poverty. So CAP is our local Head Start agency. They serve about 1,200 children across our city and are in a variety of facilities spread across the city. Tulsa Educare, some people call Tulsa Educare or the Educare model as Head Start on steroids. And the on steroids part is our federal government does not fund Head Start to the extent that it can be fully enacted. So what that means is many Head Starts are part day, part year, part-time programs. And what the research suggests is that to be effective in battling the effects of poverty, you need a full-time, full-fledged effort. So what Educare does, it brings extra dollars to the table and enacts Head Start model, but does it at a level that is to a level of excellence, where there are bachelor degree teachers in each classroom, including infants and toddlers. It's a full day, full year program. So for both of those programs, for CAP Tulsa and Tulsa Educare, we're their partner and serve as their embedded evaluator. So what we do with them is we collect information on the children and the families and the teachers and the classroom quality, and we use that information in a couple of different ways. We feed it back to the agencies and work with them and brainstorm with them to use it to improve their quality and enhance their services. And we also publish that information to spread the word to our national colleagues. You'll see that I also have the Oklahoma Department of Education and Tulsa Public Schools on there as partners. We partner with them, and they are well-known, and Oklahoma is in fact well-known for our 4-year-old pre-K program. Oklahoma was the second state to have universal and free public preschool for children, for 4-year-olds. So in 1980, okay, so think about this, quite a long time ago. In 1980, the Oklahoma Department of Education really started the wheels moving on opening services for 4-year-olds as part of public school. The program is, the goal was to become universal, and it's a free program, but it's a voluntary program. So parents don't have to subscribe to it, but it is available in 99% of the school districts now across Oklahoma. So what we know is that if we think about Head Start funding and the pre-K program, 4-year-old pre-K program that's run by public schools, 85% of Oklahoma's 4-year-olds are enrolled in a program to help support their development. Okay, those of you who are from Oklahoma, that may seem normal, but if you look across our country, that's very atypical and rare. So Oklahoma's famous for pre-K. So a lot of our friends who are early childhood educators in other states, they always want to come to Tulsa to see what the secret sauce is. Like, what's going on in Tulsa? How do you have all these great programs?
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about why the motivation behind early childhood. Why do we have these programs? How has that come about? So to get us started thinking about that, I'd like you to each consider this picture on the screen and think about the last time that you were around a young infant. Think about holding that infant and how completely helpless they are and utterly dependent on the adults in their world to provide them everything, right? They can't do anything for themselves. And then if you think about the growth that follows that, so the field of early childhood that we study, it's defined as going from birth to age 8. So now let's think about what an 8-year-old looks like in contrast to that infant. Completely different, right? The 8-year-old can move about freely. The 8-year-old can manipulate their environment. They can move objects. They can go and fetch themselves a drink, hopefully. They can be very independent with their thinking. They can express themselves, sometimes almost too well. Maybe some of you have those children. And so there's a great, vast amount of development and growth that happens during this early childhood period. Research is identifying that particularly the brain development that happens in the first 3 years of life, sometimes known as the first 1,000 days of life, is of crucial importance, and that this rapid accelerated development that occurs has lifelong consequences. And so it's really important. It's attracting the interest of researchers, it's attracting the interest of policymakers, of medical professionals, of all sorts of individuals to better understand how that development happens, how do we support it, what gets in the way, how can we help all children reach their optimal development. So how do we help children reach their optimal development? During this time, like I mentioned, infants are completely reliant on adults to provide them every input, everything that they need to explore, all of their stimuli to help them develop and proceed with their development. So we talk often about how adults can engage in serve and return interactions. So serve and return is a metaphor that you can think about, and it helps our parents, it helps our early childhood professionals to think about this. So this helps illustrate the idea that there needs to be some back and forth exchange between the adult and the child. So the child provides a cue to the adults. They cry, or they point, or they whimper, or they reach, or they may even just make a different face. And an attuned adult will notice that cue from the child, and then they will respond accordingly. And then if the adult says, "Oh, I see you're really interested in that," and the child then will sustain their interest and engagement, and maybe the child will babble back to them. And you have this back and forth, serve and return exchange that really fosters the development of children in so many complex ways that we don't even necessarily think about, but it's really important and crucial to understand. So whenever we respond to children's behaviors contingently, is what we call that, whenever you respond appropriately and based on the child's interest, what you're really doing is you're teaching that child that their caregiver can be trusted, that the world is predictable, that there are routines, and you're also beginning to teach them vocabulary when you speak to them. They're learning about the patterns of our language, the patterns of taking turns, waiting for other people. They're learning about emotions and how our faces demonstrate emotion. So they learn so much from what can seem like a very simple interaction between adults. Additionally, adults can provide an environment for children to explore, get out and touch and feel books, and even eat books, of course. You know, they want to taste everything and see how it feels and how it acts whenever they touch it and move things around. And so those two aspects, really providing a healthy and safe environment for children to explore, and these back and forth and exchanges, are ways that we can support children's development. Unfortunately, not all children experience that type of development. For a variety of reasons. Some children experience threats to their development that occur along the way instead. And so it's important, because this is such a critical time period of growth, it's important for us to understand those threats to their development and how we can help attenuate those risk factors and help support children despite those risks. So one risk that we find a lot of times in Oklahoma, as many of you are aware, we sadly have one of the highest rates of adverse childhood experiences. So children in this state are much more likely to experience neglect or witness domestic violence, witness or experience having a family member incarcerated. All of these things, these adverse childhood experiences, have been shown to have lifelong detrimental effects. So it's really important that we understand that those things are happening and how to intervene. Another risk factor that is widely experienced in Oklahoma is poverty. And poverty has been shown to have pervasive, lifelong impacts on basically all aspects of development. Whenever we look at it statistically, poverty is always the strongest predictor of all the bad outcomes. And we're working to understand how and why that is so we can help address it. But let's talk about poverty in Oklahoma. So this slide demonstrates, if you start with the red section, this is identifying families with children under 6 who have income that is less than 100% of the federal poverty level. So for a family of 4, that's about $24,000 a year. $24,000 a year for a family of 4 to try to get by on. You can imagine all of the impacts that has. It just kind of cascades to every aspect of life. And it, adds additional stress to the families. They're trying to make do with a car that's likely to break down any day, and all of these sorts of things that really just add to their burden on a daily basis, and get in the way of them being able to sit down and have these rich back and forth interactions with their family members. And then the blue section is 100 to 200% of federal poverty level, which is the low-income families. Many of these children are still served by our programs. These are families that are living below $50,000 approximately for a family of 4. And so you can tell from this graph that over 50% of children under 6 in the state of Oklahoma are experiencing low-income families or living in poverty, which has been shown, like I mentioned, to have long-reaching effects for their development. Diane's going to talk about a variety of impacts on academic outcomes, and it's important to notice that it also has impacts on health outcomes. So children who are living in poverty or are born into a low-income family are more likely to be born prematurely, to have low birth rate, to have chronic health issues, which all of these things then lead forward to chronic absenteeism from school, and lifelong impacts for their development.
So as Sherry said, I want to focus on the educational impacts of growing up in poverty. And we know from decades of research that children who grow up in poverty show up at the kindergarten door already behind their more advantaged peers. So when we observed that as a field, that brought up the question, so when does the achievement gap form? And current research suggests that it forms very, very early, scary early, shockingly early. So what this slide shows, the top line of the graph would be your average child in America. The yellow, the bar that's dipping below the average, shows that by 9 months of age, we can detect the impact of the achievement gap on children's language development. Okay, if you look at the blue bar, that shows that by 24 months of age, they have fallen further behind. So basically, most children who are healthy at birth are pretty robust. There are children who have that great serve and return experience that Sherry talked about, who continue to grow and prosper. And there are children who maybe don't have that experience and maybe have other adversities, and they just fall behind. Okay, so that's the achievement gap that you often hear educators talk about. And the achievement gap has been a long-term problem that educators have struggled with, not only in our country, but other countries as well. So there's been lots of focus by social scientists on how to close the achievement gap or reduce the achievement gap. And I believe from looking at the research that early childhood education has the power to really do those things, to narrow the achievement gap and to close the achievement gap. And I want to talk to you about some old and some newer research that shows that. So in the 1970s, colleagues of ours at the University of North Carolina started a very important research project that's become known as the Abecedarian Study. And the Abecedarian Study, they took children growing up in poverty who were infants, and they randomly assigned them to get a high-quality early childhood program or not. And these children experienced the program from birth to age 5, and then the researchers have followed these children over the course of their lives. These children are now in their 40s. And so when the children were younger, they usually assessed them every year and observed in their classrooms and checked in with their families. And what the results showed early on was the children who had the high-quality early childhood experience did better on measures of language, measures of cognition. They seemed to be better adjusted socially and emotionally. So those were robust results, and people were excited about them. But I think the more powerful results kind of unfolded over the lifetime of these children. When the children were in their 30s, what was found, the 30-year-olds who had been children who had had the Abecedarian preschool had graduated from college at 4 times the rate as the control group, who were the same kids from the same neighborhood, but just didn't have the high-quality early childhood experience. So they were better educated, had opportunities in higher ed. A stunning finding was they were 5 times less likely to use any social service support. So they were not receiving welfare. They were all gainfully employed and contributing members of society. So those are really impactful outcomes that have a big difference in an individual's life and in our society. So I mentioned these children are now in their 40s, and the researchers continue to follow them. And the 40-year-old results mirror the 30-year-old results. The children who attended the preschool, who are now in their 40s, tend to do much better on a variety of measures than the similar control group who didn't have the program. But the 40-year-old results revealed one more intriguing result, and that is males who were 40, who attended the high-quality preschool, had cardiac disease at much lower rates than the similar males in the control group. So that created quite a buzz in the literature, because this is one of the first studies that suggests that early childhood education may have some association with long-term health outcomes, and really kind of cementing the interest in looking at that intersection of early childhood and health, which is one of the new things we're going to do as we roll out our strategic plan. So the Abecedarian study really laid the foundation for investigators like us to think about what is it about early childhood environments that really support that healthy, optimal development over time. And so our current research, a lot of it builds on this foundation laid by the Abecedarian study. So before I jump into a description of one of our studies, I want to just focus on these photographs for 1 minute. So the top row shows April and Ashley, 2 of our research staff, administering assessments to young children. So when I go around and say I'm an early childhood researcher, some people think we hook kids up to electrodes or, I don't know, do frightening things to them. But you can see that our friendly researchers here are asking children to really point to pictures that represent vocabulary words, or to build towers within a certain amount of time, to look at their hand-eye coordination and similar developmental outcomes. On the bottom row, Brittany is administering a direct one-on-one assessment with even a younger child, a toddler. And you can see that's not a frightening experience for either Brittany or the child. And then also on the bottom there on the other side is Brittany doing a classroom observation. So we go into classrooms and observe what the children are experiencing. What's the nature of the teacher-child interaction? What's the nature of the peer interaction? What activities are the children engaged in? And so this is kind of what those 47 people that work with us mostly do, is to go out to schools and programs and work with children one-on-one or in classrooms on a daily basis. We also collect other types of information too. We collect surveys from teachers, we interview teachers, we also interview and survey families. So we have a variety of rich data sources and try to look at children and families comprehensively and not in a reductionistic way at all. So I'm going to switch and talk about one current study that we've been working on for quite a while, and it's our work with Tulsa Educare. So Educare here in Tulsa, I've mentioned that we have 3, and we're soon to have 4 Educare schools, and that distinguishes us across the nation. Across the nation, there are 24 Educares. We have 4, and Nebraska has 4, but everybody else has 1. So we're special in that way too. And so Educare was really born in around the year 2000 in Chicago and has kind of spread as a grassroots movement across the country. And anytime there's a new educational intervention, to demonstrate its efficacy or that it works, researchers are challenged to do an RCT, a randomized control trial, looking at that intervention versus treatment as normal or another intervention. So Educare decided they needed to fund an RCT, and here in Tulsa, we were one of the sites to participate in the RCT, along with 3 other Educare sites. So how this worked was before 18 months of age, children were randomly assigned to either get Educare or not, and how we dealt with the ethical problem that kind of comes with that is that more people wanted in Educare than there were slots for the children to enroll. So a decision was going to have to be made on who gets in and who doesn't get in. So we just asked the program to do that randomly for us so that we could design our study. So that's how that happened. So these children before 18 months of age were randomly assigned to get Educare or not, and we have been following these children. Now they're in 2nd and 3rd grade. So we intend to secure more money to follow them even further, but we also intend to work with Tulsa Public Schools to use school administrative data to also look at these children and their peers. So what we basically found with the Educare RCT is that children after just 1 year of Educare had higher verbal skills, better verbal skills. They had fewer parent-reported behavior problems, and they had better parent-child interaction as rated by independent observers. So that serve and return interaction that Sherry was talking about, we were able to see that better in the parents of the children in the program than the other parents. So already producing really promising results after just 1 year of Educare. So Sherry's going to walk us through a few other studies that we're currently doing.
So as Diane described, it's really important that we intervene early in these children's lives. It's too late, really, if we wait until they show up at kindergarten, whenever that achievement gap is already so great. It's very difficult to overcome that disparity at that time. So we've started to see more investment in preschool. We're also beginning to see the importance of the investment even before preschool. And although sometimes Oklahoma struggles to be high on the right lists, this is one place where we are kind of a shining star, and the State Department of Education has invested in infant-toddler care so that we can expand and enhance the quality available to children birth to age 3. How many of you have ever had to try to find childcare for a kid under 3? Is it easy? No. Is it easy to find somewhere you feel comfortable with? It's pretty tough. So in 2008, the State Department of Education became aware of this concern, became aware of the importance of the quality, because nationally, the evidence is showing that the quality available, particularly for infants and toddlers, is mediocre at best, and often worse than mediocre. You enter these centers and you just kind of see people they're basically just trying to provide minimal safety for children to be left and not providing really any rich interactions for the children. So the Oklahoma State Department of Ed decided to invest in expanding and enhancing the quality available to children under age 3. And during that time, since 2008, the Department of Education has put out a call for proposals, and CAP Tulsa has been the grantee during that entire time. And as part of that program, they needed external evaluation. And so the ECEI has provided that external evaluation to CAP Tulsa and to their sub-grantees throughout this time. And what we're finding is that this investment by the State Department of Ed, it comes alongside private investment, so it's really a public-private partnership, that investment is paying off. We've documented in our research that we do in fact see additional slots available for children to enroll. We do see that the quality of that care has been improved. So this chart here, I just want to walk you through it really quickly. This is comparing Oklahoma early childhood programs. This is across the state in the red, compared to the gray bars are coming from a national study of early Head Start programs. So early Head Start is similar to Head Start in that it receives federal funding. It has federal regulations for the training of teachers, for the parameters of the program. So this is we're really comparing OECP to high quality programs here. And you can see that both in emotional and behavioral support, which is the way that teachers provide proper support to children's emotional development and don't shame them. They provide warmth and they help comfort children whenever they're upset, or they share joy with them whenever they're happy and help them find good ways to control their behavior appropriately rather than responding harshly or punitively. So in the emotional and behavioral support domain, we see that the OACP programs are stronger, as well in the engaged support for learning domain, which is looking at the richness of the interactions and how caregivers are providing children with contingent responses, like I talked about earlier, and always also using rich language, new vocabulary, varied sentence structure, that sort of thing that fosters children's development. So we're seeing that, in this way, we provide these data directly back to the programs. We give them individual feedback about what we saw in their classroom that day, and they use that for coaching to further develop the teachers. And we also can then use these data to help provide to the State Department of Education evidence whenever they go back to the legislature to say, see, your investment really is paying off. And to the philanthropists who bring their, and the foundations who bring their dollars to the table as well, it's important to have these dollars, or important to have these data to show that their investment is paying off. Another line of work that we're doing here is called the Tulsa SEED study. SEED stands for School Study of Early Education and Development, and this study began in 2016, the fall of 2016, and it is going to be going on for several years now. This study we're doing in collaboration with partners at Georgetown University and McGill University, and it's being conducted kind of as a follow-up to work done by our colleague Deborah Phillips, who is at Georgetown. She did some work here in Tulsa about a decade ago, looking at pre-K experiences in Tulsa Public Schools as well as in CAP Tulsa, and she and her colleague Bill Gormley have documented long-standing impacts of those pre-K experiences. But Deborah was really interested in coming back to Tulsa and taking another look, because there are some kind of lingering questions that are really kind of nagging at the field. We need to take another dive, do a second generation of research on pre-K and better understanding these things. So we've designed this study to really address those questions. One question that we're looking at with the study is that we found that children are showing up to pre-K with a variety of background and experiences already. So we started a year earlier. We recruited children starting at age 3 in 2016. We recruited children from CAP Tulsa, from Educare, and from community-based childcare who were attending on state subsidy. And then we followed those children into pre-K, and we recruited additional children who had not been in a 3-year-old program, right? So we can compare kids who went to a program prior to pre-K and kids who didn't. Another thing that we're looking at to change up and strengthen our understanding of pre-K is using newer measures. As you can imagine, in a decade of time, our understanding of how we can measure classroom quality has really emerged. Our use of technology has improved, so we can do more precise coding of the interactions that are happening. We also are really seeing a different population in pre-K at this time. We've had an increasing number of immigrants come to Oklahoma. We have about a third of our children speak a language other than English at home. And so that's a really different situation than it was in a decade ago whenever Deborah first did her work. And then finally, the last thing we're really looking to contribute here is what happens after pre-K. So Deborah's work and the work of many other folks in the field have established that pre-K does in fact make a difference. For those of you that are researchers, there aren't many things that we will hold up as facts, but that's one thing that we feel pretty confident at this point is well documented, that pre-K does provide an initial boost. So when you go find children at kindergarten entry, that you can tell a difference between the kids that went to pre-K and those that didn't. One thing that's been kind of bothering folks, though, is that whenever you go back and find those kids at 3rd grade, you can't necessarily tell anymore who went to pre-K and who didn't. That effect seems to be going away, at least for some children and some circumstances. So we're trying to dig in and understand that a little bit better. And what we're doing to address that is, instead of just showing back up when they're in 3rd grade and checking out how they're doing, we're following these children every year. So we have funding from the National Institutes of Health, along with some foundation funding to follow the children at least through 4th grade, which will allow us to get even the children who might be retained along the way through their first standardized test through the state in 3rd grade. So each year we'll be assessing them directly, playing the learning games that Diane showed you pictures of. We'll be observing in their classrooms, talking with their parents to understand supports and struggles that they're having at home, so that we can really try to understand for whom and under what conditions are these effects of pre-K lasting, and what's helping in early education and in early elementary to sustain those effects. Then I think this is one last strand of research that I just want to talk about really quickly. So one thing that we're interested in is really understanding teacher well-being. So as you might have heard on the news, teachers in Oklahoma are kind of having a hard time. Teachers across the country are having a hard time. We have teachers who are burned out, who feel undervalued, who are underpaid, numerous struggles that are facing them. We have teachers who are having increased class sizes, all sorts of challenges that are impacting their ability to do their job every day and to feel kind of healthy and whole as a human being. So because of, Diana and I have both talked about the critical nature of the interactions between the teachers and the children. That's been shown to be, so far, the single most potent predictor of the impact of early childhood education. So for us to understand under what conditions teachers are able to be supportive, we really need to understand teachers as people too. So that's why we've launched this line of work, really exploring teacher well-being. We're exploring it in the SEED study. We've had teachers provide surveys back to us. We're looking at things like economic insecurity, food insecurity. A shockingly large number of teachers report experiencing food insecurity, which, can you imagine trying to go and serve 20, 25, 30 children in your classroom every day if you don't have adequate food at home to feed your own children? So we're looking at things like their stress that they report at home, the support that they're experiencing at home and at school, their own adverse childhood experiences, and also their self-rated depressive symptoms and those sorts of things. So we're also in the beginning stages of looking at exploring some teacher biomarkers of stress to see if we can detect physiological impacts of their stress and how that might play out in the classroom. And we'll be moving forward with some of that work, hopefully in the near future. And we also have been happy to support and partner with our friend and colleague, Dr. Kyung-Ah Kwan, and her work with the Happy Teacher Project that we've provided some amount of funding for, and also collaborative ideas. And she's really built an interdisciplinary team to look at teacher well-being from an even more holistic perspective, to look at their physiological health in a different way. So examining their chronic back pain, or in what ways their work in the classroom might be exacerbating it. Ken Randall has been involved in documenting how teachers' movements within the classroom may be, adversely impacting their own back structure and health. And Kyung-Ah has been working to document teachers' rates of obesity and urinary tract infection and depression, and just so many things that we're finding are at higher rates happening in early childhood teaching population.
So this research that Sherry and I shared that the Early Childhood Education Institute is doing is just part of a nationwide focus on early childhood environments, including outcomes for children, and focus on the teacher. And as I reviewed, research really suggests that early childhood can be a potent strategy to fight against the achievement gap, to stem it from forming or to prevent it from forming if we start early enough. So this work of our field, early childhood educators, has gotten attention from other fields. And this is a very famous graph that's up on the screen right now. It's known as the Heckman curve. And it's called the Heckman curve because a very famous economist, James Heckman, who's a Nobel Prize winning economist, is the one who did this work. So what he did is he looked at the literature and he looked at the outcomes of various early childhood programs that were offered to children of different ages. So across the bottom axis is the age at which the intervention was targeted for children. And then on the other axis is the rate of return of the investment. Okay, so he's an economist, so he talks about ROI, return on investment. And what we see there is the earlier we intervene, the higher the rate of return on the investment. So basically what Dr. Heckman's work shows us is that for every dollar we invest in an early childhood program, the rates of return have been quoted as much as $7 return for every dollar invested, up to $15 return for every dollar invested. So as an economist, he says this is one of the best investments going, that like as a country, we are foolish not to capitalize on this return on investment.
Okay, so I promise we're wrapping up. I just wanted to give you kind of a in closing set of thoughts. So here we've depicted what's a really well-known theory in child development, developmental psychology. And this documents how children, we often say, you might have heard me say this before, that children don't grow up in a bubble, but instead they grow up surrounded by this interconnected set of rings of context that are all around them. So these contexts that they experience range from what we call micro context, things that are very proximal to them. So their family, their school, their classmates, and then it goes out from there to things like their church groups or other social groups that they might be a part of, and also their pediatrician and the supports that they receive from the medical community. And then we go out to broader rings and we look at how the parent's workplace might impact the type of experience that children have at home. If the parent is overburdened at work, then they might not be able to be as attuned whenever they're at home with their child. And we look at things like the neighborhood, legal services, the school board, the community health that is available to the family. All of these things either directly or indirectly impact the development of children.
So this is a very well-known theory of child development that many of you may be familiar with. And when I look at that and hear Sherry talk, I think about all the disciplines we have here at OU Tulsa that study these various influences. When I look at that chart, I see social work and I see religious studies, and I see sociology and psychology and health and medicine, all the disciplines that we have represented across OU. So how we think about this is OU is so well positioned to further this line of research. You know, I brought up the exciting findings from the Abecedarian study of the connection between health and education. Here in Tulsa, we're perfectly poised to really launch into that line of research and help figure that out, not only for us here in Tulsa, but for our nation. Tulsa, we have excellent early childhood education programs who welcome us as research partners. We have our group who has an established presence in the community and has a core of really skilled and competent data collectors ready to go out and collect information on children. We have healthcare, health and medicine here on this campus. We have HSC in Oklahoma City. We have more disciplines on the Norman campus. We're really calling for everybody to join us kind of in this enterprise of researching young children and early childhood education. Hassam, we even want engineers. We even see a role for engineers because, as Sherry mentioned, with particularly the youngest children, our measurement devices are difficult because a lot of our assessments require the children to speak, and infants can't speak. So we're really looking forward to partnering with engineers to get nonverbal data collection methods, in addition to the biomarkers that Sherry talked about. So we really think that OU is positioned to move ahead and be leaders in this exciting new area. And this is important not only for OU, because we want to be great researchers and we want to double research, but it's really critical for our society. I hope that Sherry and I have convinced you of the power of early childhood and why it's a worthy investment, and how working together we can really even make that better, a better investment, and have not only good outcomes for our children here in Tulsa, but for children and families across our country. So thank you.
Both so much. That was really, really excellent. And since we're kind of out of time, I think I would just ask one question. I was curious, from a medical perspective, you know, sometimes when we do these RCTs, eventually we find the intervention is actually so beneficial that they stop the trial. And I've always wondered with the Abecedarian study, when you've shown that early childhood education has this incredibly positive effect, would it even be ethical to start a trial, start a study like that nowadays? I mean, it's longitudinal, so you're kind of doing, I guess, a control group, which is like the normal versus the intervention.
Well, as I explained with our Educare RCT, we started that study around 2010. I'm looking at Melissa, 2010. So yes, we really wrestled with the ethical implications of it, because by then there was a body of literature that suggested that exposure to a high quality program did make a difference. And we knew that the kids in the control group, we were denying them that experience. So that is something we actively wrestled with as a group of researchers, because it was involved federal funding for the Head Start program. We had to go all the way up to the highest levels of approval. And in fact, it took us about 18 months to have that study approved by everyone who needed to approve it before we could launch it.
Do you guys have an extra minute to stay behind if people have questions?
Yes,
Why
we
don't
do.
well, let's give Dr. Rafai one question and then we'll wrap it.
Heckling, awesome.
Since he's been singled out.
Mm-hmm. You want to address that?
Right, so we do our best to document children's development whenever they are, when English is their second language. Many of our measures are not available in all the languages that we find children speaking here in Tulsa, because we do have increasing diversity. But the biggest part of our sample is always Spanish speaking, and we do have a cadre of Spanish speaking assessors and measures that have been developed that can assess children in Spanish as well as in English. And so we've been tracking, especially the SEED study is our most longitudinal study. And we do track children's development of their vocabulary in both English and Spanish, and we're watching to see how those grow together. And sometimes there is this thought that there's, a silent period or a time of being behind in kind of both areas, and then they might catch up. We're seeing that children's Spanish is disappearing faster than we would really like to see, so that's something we're going to be talking with our colleagues about of, how can we, I don't know about any of you, but we're constantly looking for people who are Spanish-English bilinguals. That's a huge gift to and qualifying factor to have that skill set, so we would like to find ways to support that bilingualism in young children.
Thank you. Well, Doctors Horm and Castle, sorry, are going to stick around, and thank you. But I want to thank, if we could have a round of applause to thank them for being our initial